Hello everyone, welcome to today's class, Political Science CUT class. So we are going to continue the sixth chapter. Uh, the sixth chapter, as you know, that it is about the crisis of emergency. So last class we saw about how what are the things which led to the emergency. In today's class we are going to see what happened during emergency and what were the things continued after emergency, what were the repercussions that happened, and about the election which followed after the emergency period, and about the Janata Party forming the government, and then again Indira Gandhi coming to power. So all these things we are going to see today's class. So be patient and see, because this is very important feature and important aspect of our politics since independence. Hence we need to know the details about what happened during emergency. So what was the crisis all about? So the opposition parties, political parties led by Jayaprakash Narayan pressed for Indira Gandhi's resignation, as we know that the Allahabad High Court had told that Indira Gandhi's membership has gone and she can remain and she went to the Supreme Court. And what Supreme Court said? Supreme Court basically stayed the Allahabad High Court's order, but it said that Prime Minister cannot participate in the Lok Sabha, but she can remain as the Prime Minister. So the basically opposition parties, as we know, Jayaprakash Narayan was a great leader who was opposing Congress party at that time. He organized a massive demonstration in Delhi's Ram Leela ground on 25th June 1975. Jayaprakash announced a nationwide satyagraha for his resignation and asked the army, the police and the government employees not to obey illegal and immoral orders. These two threatened to bring the activities of the government to a standstill. The political mood of the country had turned against the Congress more than ever before. So that was the power, that was the opposition at that time against Indira Gandhi's Congress. So the response of the government was to declare a state of emergency. On 25th June 1975, the government declared that there was a threat to internal disturbances because of threat of internal disturbances, and therefore it evoked Article 352 of the Constitution. So some of the important aspects which are here to be noted so that you can answer it in the CUT exam. For example, the person who led the plan to lead the biggest demonstration against the government was Jayaprakash Narayan. And what was the article which invoked for national emergency? That was Article 352. And for what aspect? Basically in Article 352 itself there is an internal emergency, external emergency is there. So it is internal emergency and internal disturbances, and on which day it was proclaimed, the emergency was proclaimed. That was on 25th June 1975. So under the provisions of this article, the government could declare a state of emergency on the grounds of external threat or a threat of internal disturbances, as I told you. So the government decided that a grave crisis had arisen which made the proclamation of the state of emergency necessary. So technically speaking, this was within the powers of the government, for our constitution provides for some special powers to the government once an emergency is declared. We know that India's system, it is quasi-federal in nature. There is a federalism with a centralizing tendency. We have seen this in 11th standard NCRT as well. So there is some extra power which is given to the central government. Hence the central government has used this emergency power. This is it is not non-constitutional. It is within the ambit of the constitution. So once an emergency is proclaimed, the federal distribution of powers remain practically suspended, and all the powers are concerned in the hands of union government. So basically when the emergency is proclaimed, you know that just for getting the powers of the state government, it cannot be done just like that, because you need to have a constitutional amendment in normal circumstances. But during emergency, without doing any constitutional amendment, the central government gets the powers okay, of the state government. So hence the federal distribution of the power remains practically suspended. Secondly, the government also gets the power to curtail or restrict all or any of the fundamental rights during the emergency. So this is also a very interesting part, that during emergency fundamental rights are suspended. So from the wordings of the provisions of the constitution, it is clear that an emergency is seen as an extraordinary condition in which normal democratic processes cannot function. Therefore, special powers are granted to the government. So this happens. So basically two things, as I told you. Number one, when the emergency is declared, federal distribution of powers gets suspended, and also the government gets the power to curtail the or restrict the fundamental rights. So on the night of 25th June 1975, Prime Minister recommended the imposition of the emergency to President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad. This can be one question for CUET. Who was the president at that time when the emergency was declared in 1975? It was President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad. He issued the proclamation immediately after midnight. The electricity to all the major newspapers offices were disconnected. In the early mornings, a large number of leaders and the workers of the opposition parties were arrested. The cabinet was informed about it at a special meeting at 6 a.m. on 26 June. So after all this had taken place, this is one interesting point, that the cabinet was not aware earlier, and the proclamation happened in the night 25th June 1975, and the next day on 26th June, the next day only the cabinet was called, and a special meeting was called, and all these things were explained to them. So basically there were some loopholes. We know that what happened after emergency. So these loopholes were later they were rectified. What are the consequences of having this emergency? This brought the agitation to an abrupt stop. Strikes were banned and many opposition leaders were put in jail. The political situation became very, very quite tense. So the government suspended the freedom of the press. That fundamental rights can be suspended during the emergency, hence that happened. So the press freedom was not there, and then the press censorship happened, and we can see that some organizations were also banned at that time, like RSS and Jamaat-e-Islami. So these were banned at the time, and then protest and strikes and public agitations were also disallowed. So most importantly, under the provisions of emergency, the various fundamental rights of the citizens stood suspended, including the right to citizens to move the court for restoring their fundamental right, which is Article 32. Right to constitutional remedies also went suspended. Hence, the people cannot go to the court, asking it like a fundamental right. They could not go. What was the Supreme Court's judgment on preventive detention? So a very interesting point, what happened during emergency. So using preventive detention, the government made large scale arrest at that time. So arrested political workers could not challenge their arrest through habeas corpus because it was suspended. So many cases were filed in the high courts and the Supreme Court on behalf of the arrested persons, but the government claimed that it was not even necessary to inform the arrested person of the reason and grounds of their arrest. Several high courts gave judgments that even after the declaration of emergency, the courts could entertain a writ of habeas corpus filed by the person challenging his or her detention. Here comes the high courts which are taking part, and they are telling even if it has happened, fundamental rights are suspended, but the high courts can give judgments. They said on habeas corpus petition. But very interesting thing happened on 1976 April. Around 10 months after emergency was declared, the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court, it overruled the high courts and accepted the government's plea. So this judgment was very interesting, that the Supreme Court said by the constitutional judgment, by the constitutional bench, that during emergencies when these are suspended, the high courts could not hear the habeas corpus petition. So this judgment closed the doors of the judiciary for the people, of the citizens, and is regarded as one of the most controversial judgments of the Supreme Court. So we need to know in which year Supreme Court overruled the high court's judgment regarding habeas corpus petition under during national emergency. It is in April 1976. Let us see about the press during emergency. So it was a very pathetic condition at that time. So newspapers like the Indian Express, the Statesman, these people used to do like because of censorship, if the government is not allowing something to be printed, they will leave that place blank. So when the people get the newspaper, so they will know that why this place is blank, and they would know that okay, this part was censored by the government. So they use that trick. And then you see when afterwards the government told them that they cannot even leave the space blank also. Like magazines like Seminar, the Mainstream, they were closed down because they don't want to go under this censorship. Many journalists were arrested and many went underground, and underground newsletters, okay, leaflets, they were published. So Kannada writer Shivarama Karath, and then Hindi writer Fanishwarnath Renu, all these people basically they returned their awards. Shivarama Karath was a Padma Bhushan awardee, and Fanishwarnath Renu, he was a Padma Shri awardee. So these people just they returned their awards in protest against the emergency. But such open acts of defiance and resistance were very rare at the time. Constitutional amendments during emergency. There were 3 constitutional amendments, very interesting parts. Okay, you know that an amendment was made declaring the elections of the Prime Minister, President and Vice President could not be challenged in the court. And then the 42nd constitutional amendment, which is considered as the mini constitution, it was also passed during the emergency. Among the various changes made by this amendment, one was that the duration of the legislatures in the country was extended from 5 to 6 years. So this change was not only for the emergency period, but was intended to be of a permanent nature. Besides this, during an emergency, elections can be postponed by 1 year. Thus, effectively after 1971, elections needed to be held only in 1978 instead of 1976. So there were some constitutional amendments as well. We know that the track record, the things which folded, the incidents which happened, which led to the emergency, there was one important issue which was between the government and the Supreme Court. So here we can see during emergency also, the government wanted to make some constitutional amendments. Let us see what are the lessons we learned from emergency. One lesson of the emergency is that it is extremely difficult to do away with democracy in India. All the things which happened, okay, during emergency also, it has to be again taken back, and then election could have to be taken place again, and then the government was changed. All those things happened. So one important lesson which we learned is that it is extremely difficult to do away with democracy in India. Secondly, it brought out some ambiguities regarding the emergency provision in the constitution about article 352. As I told you, there was internal disturbance, the word was there. Now after the emergency, the word was changed like in armed rebellion. So you cannot take emergency provisions because of, you cannot impose emergency just because of internal disturbance. Now there should be armed rebellion, then only emergency can be proclaimed. And cabinet decision in writing is needed. So these things were not there earlier. Hence we saw that Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, the then president, was he was informed and he just proclaimed the national emergency. The next day morning 6 a.m. the cabinet was called. Okay, so but now the change has happened that constitution, the emergency can be said only in writing. The cabinet decision should be given in writing, written should be there, and then it can be only for armed rebellion, not for internal disturbance. Thirdly, the emergency made everyone more aware of the values of the civil liberties. So the courts too have taken an active role after the emergency in protecting the civil liberties of the individuals. There is a tension between routine functioning of a democratic government and the continuous political protest by parties and groups. So what is the correct balance between the two? So this also has to be addressed. Okay, these are one important lesson. According to the Shah Commission report, the administration and the police became vulnerable to the political pressure. This problem also did not vanish even after the emergency. So Shah Commission report was there. It came after the emergency. They said the administration and the police, they were basically vulnerable under this political pressure during emergency, and this has to be rectified. But even today we say that the problem is still there, persist. Let us see about politics after emergency, what happened. So this is very important, interesting point here, that in 1977 elections turned into a referendum. As we know that emergency took place in 1975 and 1977 elections took place. It was a referendum against Indira Gandhi, against the emergency. At least in the North India, where the impact of the emergency felt most strongly. The opposition fought the election on the slogan of Save Democracy. You see very interesting points there, that Indira Gandhi came about, about Garibi Hatao, and then the problems happened, and then she won the elections in 1971, and after that emergency comes, and now the opposition against Indira Gandhi, they are getting the slogan Slave Democracy. The people's verdict was decisively against the emergency. The lesson was clear and has been reiterated in many state level elections. So the things is changing, routine and this is a very beauty of Indian democracy, that what happened in 1967, it changed altogether in 1971 elections. And now again after emergency the things are changing. As I told you earlier that around 9 states in 1967 the Congress government or the Congress party lost. But in 1971 Indira Gandhi took all the states back. The Congress party backed by her, she took the all the states back. But now what is happening? After emergency again it is changing, that the Congress lost most of the state level elections thereafter, and the governments that are perceived to be anti-democratic are severely punished by the voters. So in this sense, the experiment of the 1975 to 77 ended up strengthening the foundations of democracy in India. That is why we told you that it is not possible, it is very extremely difficult to change India's democracy. So democracy will be there, it is not possible to remove that democracy, and that is the very important lesson we learn from emergency. Lok Sabha elections 1977. In January 1977, after 18 months of emergency, this is very important data for you for CUET exam, how many months emergency was there. It was for 18 months. The government decided to hold elections. Accordingly, all the leaders and the activists were released from jail. Elections were held in March 1977. In which month and year elections took place after emergency? It is March 1977. This left the opposition with very little time, but political developments took place very rapidly. You see what happened? Basically, the opposition parties were given very less time, but since they were in jail for so long, around 2 years, and there was a very good coordination among them. Hence, what they could do, the major opposition party that already had been coming closer in the pre-emergency period, now they come closer on the eve of the election and formed a new party known as the Janata Party. The new party name is Janata Party, which came about after emergency. They accepted the leadership of Jayaprakash Narayan, whose leadership was accepted after emergency in the Janata Party. It is Jayaprakash Narayan. Some leaders of the Congress who were opposed to the emergency, they also joined this party. So we are seeing about the Lok Sabha elections after emergency. Some other Congress leaders who also came out and formed a separate party under the leadership of Jagjivan Ram. This party name was Congress for Democracy. Later this party was also merged with the Janata Party. The Janata Party made this election into a referendum on the emergency. Its campaign was focused on a non-democratic character of the rule. The formation of the Janata Party also ensured that non-Congress votes would not be divided. So this was the alliance which came together and formed a new party so that the votes against Congress should not be divided. Hence this happened, that non-Congress votes would not be divided. Yet the final results, this is very interesting in the Indian democracy, that it surprised all. Why? Of course the Congress lost the election. Okay, they got very less seats when compared to the last elections, but there was a small change thing is there, because in the southern states, even in the Maharashtra and Karnataka, the Congress did not lose everything, but in the Hindi heartland, most of the states Congress won nothing. So the Congress could win only 154 seats in the Lok Sabha. Its shares of the popular vote fell to less than 35%. The Janata Party and its allies basically 330 seats they won out of 542 in the Lok Sabha. Janata Party alone, it won around 295 seats. Huge number and clear majority. You know that 272 is enough to form a government. They got actually 295 seats. In North India, it was a massive electoral wave against the Congress. The Congress lost in every constituency in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Haryana and Punjab, and could win only one seat each in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. This was a huge defeat for the Congress. You see, in Bihar, UP, Delhi, Haryana and Punjab, Congress did not win even a single seat after the emergency in 1977 elections, and it could win only one seat in a huge, bigger states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So that was the electoral defeat of the Congress after emergency. Indira Gandhi was defeated from Raebareli. Even Indira Gandhi got defeated. A very bold leader of the time, she got defeated, and as was her son Sanjay Gandhi also was defeated from Amethi. Continue with the 1977 elections. Congress did not lose all the elections, as I told you, across India, because it got some seats even in the southern states. In the North India, it was a very big debacle. Okay. So to begin with, the impact of the emergency was not felt equally in all these states. The forced relocation and displacement, the forced sterilizations were mostly concentrated in the northern states. But more importantly, North India had experienced some long-term changes in the nature of political competition. The middle class from North India were beginning to move away from the Congress, and the Janata Party became a platform for many of these sections to come together. So in this sense, the election of 1977 were not merely about the emergency, because there was a change happening from 1971 onwards. Okay, so there was so many people, so many communities in the North India, they were just moving away from Congress bash, and then they are going to these socialist leaders like Jayaprakash Narayan. Okay, these people were having a platform. So Janata Party took the vote share from this Congress, and they got the backward communities vote share, and hence they can sweep the North India. Let us see, you see this image, this is Lok Sabha election results 1977. This dark green part this is won by basically Janata Party, and this is yellow, this is by the Indian National Congress, and left parties it is orange. Okay, and then other parties, other independents and all, this is in blue. So you can see the Congress did not win in the North India, entire North India, you see, except one or two places, entire North India it is green, means the Janata Party. And Congress won in the South India, especially you see in the Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh at that time, and some parts of Maharashtra, Congress won. So this was the result in the 1977 general elections. Let us see about the government, Janata government. Since they got the numbers, they could form the government easily, no? So the Janata Party government that came to power after 1977 election was far from cohesive. There was no strong bond or a correct, clear-cut direction, because there are so many leaders within the Janata Party who wanted to become the Prime Minister. So that was a big issue there. After the election, there was a stiff competition, and finally Morarji Desai, he became the Prime Minister, who was the rival to Indira Gandhi ever since 1966 to 67. Charan Singh, a leader of the Bharatiya Lok Dal, a farmers leader from UP, and Jagjeevan Ram, who had a very vast experience as a senior minister in the Congress government. These people were the competitors for the Prime Ministership at the time. Morarji Desai, Charan Singh, Jagjeevan Ram. Eventually, Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister. So this was a question earlier in the CUET, that who was the first non-Congress Prime Minister of India? It was Morarji Desai. He was basically from Maharashtra. Okay. So he became the prime minister, but Morarji Desai, after becoming prime minister, he could not run the government for the next 5 years. There was a collapse of the Janata government. So it was only for a while that opposition to the emergency could keep the Janata Party together. Janata Party lacked direction, leadership and a common program. The Janata Party government could not bring about a fundamental change in the policies from those pursued by the Congress. There was not a big change. Of course, they made some changes in the constitutional amendment by Article 44th Constitutional Amendment. Interestingly, Indira Gandhi brought 42nd Constitutional Amendment. Janata government brought 44th Constitutional Amendment, in which they changed some of the things, okay, which Indira Gandhi changed in the Constitution. There was Constitutional Amendment, but they retained fundamental duties, okay, and many other policies which Indira Gandhi, brought. So they could not pursue any fundamental change. The Janata Party split happened, and the government, which was led by Morarji Desai, lost its majority in less than 28 months, meaning not more than 2.5 years it was there in power. Hence another government was headed by Charan Singh. The next person becomes a prime minister, and was formed on the assurance of the support of the Congress party. You see, the Congress party is supporting Charan Singh. Okay, so this is the game in politics altogether, that there is no permanent enemy, no permanent friend. So here you see the Congress party is supporting Charan Singh. But the Congress party later decided to withdraw its support, with the result that the Charan Singh government could remain in power for just about 4 months. So basically, Charan Singh was prime minister for only 4 months. So this person, Morarji Desai, he was there for 28 months as a prime minister, but Charan Singh could be there for only 4 months. What happens next? 1980 general elections happened. So the governments did not complete the tenure. The Lok Sabha was dissolved even before the elections, before the tenure of the Lok Sabha, which is 5 years. So fresh Lok Sabha elections were held in January 1980, in which Janata Party suffered a comprehensive defeat. Now again the cycle is changing. As I told you, 1967 elections, Congress was defeated. And okay, it goes basically, of course it had numbers, but many stalwarts lost the elections. 1971, again they got the elections, win the election. The Congress was very, it was in a very good position. Then what happened? Next elections, Congress lost after the independence in 1977. Then again in 1980, again the Congress is winning it back, all the seats which it lost. The Congress party led by the Indira Gandhi nearly repeated its great victory in 1971. What happened in 1971? We know that the same thing was repeated. It won 353 seats and came back to power. The experience of the 1977, 1999, 79 taught another example, a lesson in the democratic politics, that are governments that are seen to be unstable and quarrelsome are severely punished by the voters. So the voters are watching. If if governments are seen to be unstable and there is a quarrelsome every time it is happening, then the people are not going to vote them again. So this was one interesting, a lesson which people gave. What is the legacy of the emergency? We need to know what is the legacy of the emergency. Between the elections of the 1977-1980, the party system had changed dramatically. Since 1969, the Congress had started shedding its character as the umbrella party. As I told you earlier, that the first Congress government, the interim government, we can see that there are so many people. Ambedkar was part of the cabinet, and then Bharatiya Janasangh leaders were also part of the parliament, because basically the Congress party. Okay, the Congress party was something like an umbrella. It could have so many people, and earlier even the communist, the socialist ideology people were also there in the Congress. But what is happening since 1969? The Congress party has started shedding its character as an umbrella party. Okay, now it is basically identified as a particular ideology, claiming to be only socialist and pro-poor party. So thus, with the early 1970s, the Congress political success depend on attracting people on the basis of the sharp social and ideological divisions and appeal for one leader, Indira Gandhi. So now the party is changing, its political success is changing. So with the change in the nature of the Congress party, other opposition parties relied more and more on what is known as Indian politics as non-Congressism. Now the Congress is a separate party, hence the other new parties which are coming, they all started their policy like by talking against the Congress, going against the Congress, and they use this non-congressism. They also realized the need to avoid a division of non-Congress votes in the election. So this factor played a major role in the elections of 1977. So this is a legacy which we need to understand of the emergency. In an indirect manner, the issue of the welfare of the backward caste also began to dominate politics since 1977. The results of the 1977 elections were at least partly due to the shift among the backward caste of North India. As I told you, after the emergency, as I told you in that, showed you in the map, that the North India, most of the places were won by the Janata Party because of the shift of the backward communities to the Janata Party. So they didn't vote for the Congress. Hence, the results of 1977 elections were at least partly due to the shift among the backward castes of North India. Following the Lok Sabha elections, many states also held assembly elections in 1977. Again, the northern states elected non-Congress governments in which the leaders of the backward caste played an important role. So the issue of reservation for other backward classes also became very controversial in Bihar, and following this the Mandal Commission was appointed by the Janata Party government at the center. So these are very important points which we need to know how the reservation for the backward communities came into being. So it all has a connection with the emergency period, and after emergency period how a new parties came into power and how people shifted from Congress to the socialist leaders and the Janata Party. So the emergency and the period around it can be described as a period of constitutional crisis, because it had its origin in the constitutional battle over the jurisdiction of the parliament and the judiciary, as I told you. So there was something problem which was going on before emergency also between the parliament and the judiciary. On the other hand, it was a period of political crisis as well. The party in power had absolute majority, and yet its leadership decided to suspend the democratic process during the emergency period. So the makers of the constitution thought even during the emergency, when the government would use extraordinary powers, its use would be within the norms of rule of law. This expectation led to the wide and open-ended powers. So the open-ended powers were given to the central government because the makers of the constitution thought that this will be used only in a rare case. There was abuse during emergency. Abuse happened during emergency, that so many people were put in jail. Opposition were, all the leaders of the opposition were in jail. So there was abuse happened. This political crisis was more serious than the constitutional crisis. This is also a legacy. And finally, another critical crisis issue that emerged during this period was the role and the extent of mass protest in the parliamentary democracy. There was a clear tension between institution-based democracy and democracy based on spontaneous popular participation. As I told you, there was a movement in Bihar, there was a movement in Gujarat, there was a railway strike, there was a farmers protest, there was labor protest, all these things happening. So there was a clear tension between institution based democracy, with parliament you have, executive, all these things, institution based democracy, and democracy based on spontaneous popular participation. So this tension may be attributed to the inability of the party system to incorporate the aspirations of the people. This is very important point. You should know that at that time also the parties were there, but they were not resembling what the people want. Okay, so that was the main issue at that time. With this we conclude today's class. Hope you enjoyed. You take notes, you remember the years and the names of the leaders who took part, who worked during this emergency period. Thank you very much.